It's safe to predict that it won't be long before the United States finds itself involved in some sort of confrontation that will trigger a new World War III amongst key world powers in light of China's testing the waters in the Pacific and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. What strategy does America have in place to emerge victorious? To learn more, watch the thrilling new video from today. The world is on the verge of a full-scale nuclear war. President of the United States, Joe Biden, stated that the world is the closest it has been to a nuclear catastrophe in 60 years, which is why it is not surprising that many of us are concerned. This is his most candid assessment to date. We have not faced the prospect of Armageddon since Kennedy and the Cuban Missile Crisis, he said, and Putin and his officials have threatened nuclear weapons against the US and its allies in pursuit of its invasion of Ukraine. Even though the idea of nuclear war is grim and sad, it is only reasonable to be interested in its potential. A global study led by climate scientists from Rutgers University makes an estimate of post-conflict crop production. To ascertain what would occur in the event of a nuclear war, the study's lead author, Lily Shia, an assistant studies professor in the Department of Environmental Sciences at Rutgers University, and co-author Alan Robach, a renowned professor of climate science in the same department, have built on prior research. The data tell us one thing: we must prevent a nuclear war from ever happening, comments Robach. The researchers calculated soot dispersion for various conflict scenarios, including more minor India-Pakistan conflicts and a major US-Russian conflict. They calculated the destruction amount depending on each nation's nuclear arsenal size. The White House creates a plan for World War III. Less than a week after President Joe Biden issued a nuclear Armageddon warning concerning the US-Russian confrontation, the White House unveiled its national security strategy, which vowed to win American global hegemony through military forces. The paper included promises to strengthen the U.S. military, integrate economic life with war-making, and win the competition for the 21st century in what it referred to as the decisive decade. Biden's national security strategy states that the United States is embroiled in an existential battle with Russia and, most importantly, China. It fully embraces the fascist would-be tyrant Donald Trump's 2018 national security strategy. We are now in the early years of a decisive decade for America and the world, declares Biden's personal introduction to the document. The terms of geopolitical competition between the major powers will be set. These opening remarks reaffirm Biden's March statement that a new world order is imminent and that we've got to lead it. Like Trump's 2018 national security strategy, Biden's plan is virulently nationalistic. It claims that the United States acts primarily to protect its own interests rather than those of mankind or its allies. Biden says, "Our strategy is founded on our national interests." The paper threatens that our military power continues to expand and promises to modernize and strengthen our military so it is ready for the era of strategic struggle. According to the document, nuclear deterrence remains a top priority for the nation and is foundational to U.S. policy. War, Biden says in his introduction, will be a source of national rejuvenation. The United States has a tradition of transforming foreign challenges into opportunities to spur rejuvenation at home. The infamous Total War Manifesto of Alfred Jodl, head of the German High Command during World War II, stated that only the singleness and unity of the state, armed forces, and people can assure success in war is echoed in these ideas. These concepts were developed under the Trump administration and openly drew inspiration from the Third Reich. The United States' main concern. China is the United States' primary concern. According to the document, we will effectively compete with the People's Republic of China, which is the only competitor with both the intention and, increasingly, the capability to reshape the international order. The White House's fact sheet focuses so intently on China that it makes no mention whatsoever of the conflict in Ukraine. Despite the Biden administration's assertions that if it weren't for Russian President Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine, the world would grow like a garden, the policy does not base the U.S. military buildup and war preparations on Putin's actions. The post-Cold War era is certainly over, and a competition is begun between the great powers to shape what follows next. According to the U.S. struggle to win the 21st century, the U.S. continues to substantially increase the fight with Russia, even as the national security strategy turned its attention to China. Defense Secretary Lloyd J. Austin made it plain that the U.S. has told its Ukrainian proxy forces to continue their onslaught through the winter while speaking at a U.S.-led Ukraine Defense Contact Group gathering. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg made it clear that the US and its allies will counter Russia's threats to use nuclear weapons in the battle with their own nuclear saber-rattling before this week's NATO summit. Stoltenberg intended to send nuclear-capable bombers on a training mission over southern Europe, saying, "Next week, NATO will hold its long-planned deterrence exercise, Steadfast Noon." The NATO training exercise threatens to further escalate the conflict at a time when Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has urged NATO to launch preemptive attacks against Russia, and Russia has threatened to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine. Stoltenberg declared, "Next week, NATO will hold its long-planned deterrence exercise, Steadfast Noon," outlining his desire to send nuclear-capable bombers to southern Europe for training. The NATO training exercise threatens to escalate the conflict further because Russian President Vladimir Putin has threatened to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called on NATO to launch preemptive strikes against Russia. The U.S. defense budget. The U.S. Senate approved an $858 billion National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, on Thursday, which was $45 billion more than the White House proposal, which was $45 billion more than the Pentagon's request. The budget represents an increase of 8% over the previous year and a 30% increase in military spending over the Pentagon's 2016 budget. The enormous increase in military spending coincides with a 3% natural income decline for the typical U.S. household over the previous 12 months. Most Americans needed to know that the item was up for discussion or a vote. The evening network news should have covered the record-breaking budget's passage through the Senate or the House of Representatives. Every military department and weapons program will receive more funding under the measure. The U.S. Navy will receive $32 billion for new warships, including 3 destroyers of the Arleigh Burke class and 2 submarines of the Virginia class. Additionally, the Pentagon has been permitted to buy 36 more F-35s, costing about $89 million. Congressmen did not attempt to conceal the fact that the bill's primary goal was to get ready for what they called a future fight with China and the continuing proxy war being waged by the U.S. against Russia. This year's NDAA takes concrete steps towards preparing for a future conflict with China by investing in American hard power, strengthening American posture in the Indo-Pacific, and supporting our allies. Wisconsin Republican Representative Mike Gallagher said, by giving Taiwan its first direct military assistance of $10 billion, the NDAA will overturn Washington's long-standing One China policy. The law will also establish no-bid contracts, which are only ever utilized during times of war, and let defense companies charge the U.S. government whatever they want. Like how Ukraine is acting as a U.S. proxy for war with Russia, the measure turns Taiwan into a frontline proxy for confrontation with China. According to a press release from Gallagher, the law provides comparable drawdown ability to arm Taiwan as we have Ukraine, which is a positive development. The First and Second World Wars were preceded by years of increased military spending in a vast worldwide weapons race. One of the main arguments used by the Nuremberg Tribunal to convict the Nazi leaders was that they permitted a long military buildup before initiating an aggressive war. Nearly every practical step needed for the United States to conduct a successful war is in place. The government adopted several actions to guarantee that Americans would support the war effort. They spread the slogan, "American first, American above all," to give the citizens a feeling that the war would solely be fought in their interest. But the question remains unanswered. Are we prepared for a deadly combat? Make sure to let us know your thoughts down below. Subscribe to the channel as a sacrifice to the gods of the algorithm. Thanks for watching.